You guys, Yulia here. So these past few weeks, I decided to organize my photos because they were clogging up my phone and my computer and I was running out of memory. So I put all of the photos on these hard drives, and as I was going through all of the old photos, there's so much inspiration here, both from the garden, but also for Christmas. So what I decided to do is put together a video just with the Christmas inspiration from the last 5 years or so. In 2019, I decided to experiment with different wreaths. So this one I made out of blue spruce and Leland cypress branches with their beautiful blue hues. And then I added some dried fruit like dried grapefruit and oranges, and also cinnamon sticks. And not only did this wreath look good, it smelled amazing. The second wreath I made out of miscanthus grass and holly berries. This is Nellie Stevens holly, and I also added some magnolia leaves. The third wreath was very different. I just used some euonymus from the garden, and I added some holly berries, dusty millers, and sweet gumballs. I didn't do a lot of outdoor decorating that year. The only thing I did is this cast iron container that I decorated with Leland cypress and some red twig dogwood. For the indoor, I made this arrangement with cyclamen, driftwood, and moss, which I absolutely loved. We actually used it as a centerpiece for our Christmas dinner that year. It was beautiful, and I added some of the cyclamen flowers in the napkins. That year, I also made bark pots for my amaryllis display. So you basically take a plastic pot and you glue some bark on top of it, and it turned out beautiful. I also had some paper whites blooming just in time for Christmas that year. As for the Christmas tree, it was a very plain display that year. Everything was pretty much from the dollar store. I made more wreaths in 2020, like this one. It had a lot of ingredients in there. It had pine, Leland cypress, juniper, and also eucalyptus. But I also made these beautiful paper cup bells out of paper cups that looked totally real. On the other side of the door, I made this more simple wreath. I just used the bottoms of the Christmas tree that we got that year, and I added some lights that I bought from Michael's. It had little pine cones. It was just adorable. And then I made a couple more wreaths because I just wanted to experiment. So this very simple one, half of it was Leland cypress and half of it was eucalyptus. Now this one, made out of magnolia leaves, was so difficult to make. Don't try this at home, you guys. I really do not know what the secret is to making magnolia wreaths, but it was really, really hard for me. That same year, I also made a lot of moss spheres. I find them so charming and warm and natural, and I kind of had them laid out everywhere. That year was also the first year I installed a garland in front of our house, and it was very simple, a light, somewhat a thinner garland. I've made a lot larger garlands since then, but I actually like the simplicity and how light it looked. I may go back to this size garland now. And this right here is the night view of the garland and the window box on the second floor, and also you could see the Christmas trees on the side. That year we also got an artificial Christmas tree in addition to real one, and I decorated this tree with all of the stuff that I had from the garden. I made braids out of grasses and added some dried alliums and also dried amaranth, and I embellished it with all of the garden related ornaments like birds and deer and little birdhouses. Our regular fresh Christmas tree was pretty much a repeat from the previous year, just lots of dollar store stuff, and just it's very shiny. In 2021, I decided to go all in with the garland for the front of the house. As a base, I used a pine garland from Home Depot that was very thin, and then I embellished it with a Leland cypress from the garden. And I also added these bittersweet vine branches that I found, and it was so beautiful. I think they added a lot of movement and character to the whole display. And of course, the lights were really, really nice as well. And this is what the garland looked like in the evening. And this is what it looked like at night. You could see the Christmas trees on both sides and also the wreath that was all lit up at night. It was just magical with the window box up top as well. The wreath for the front door was made out of misquientas with Nellie Stevens holly branches and some magnolia leaves. And I also added those little fairy lights with the pine cones. And this is what the wreath looked like at night. It's absolutely beautiful. And this is the view into the hallway with some of the living plants with fairy lights on them. The Christmas tree was interesting that year. I just used some of the ornaments that I had from previous years together with beads that I found. And at some point, either the cats or the dog got into the bottom of the tree and kind of disassembled it, but I thought it was just so charming. It actually added a lot of character to the tree. As for the artificial tree, we decided to put it in the kitchen that year, and I decorated it with dried fruit and a lot of stuff from the garden. But what I loved the most were these Christmas roses, or Helleborus niger, that looked so beautiful. I planted them in my favorite berg spots, and they added so much life to this composition. In 2022, I once again decided to try to make something new. So I made this chandelier wreath, and it turned out so beautiful. Basically used some greens from the garden like Leland cypress and golden mop, and I just added some ornaments to the chandelier itself. This looked so beautiful from every angle. If you were sitting down at the table, if you were just entering the room, and at night you could see how beautiful it looks with the Christmas tree that we had that year. As for the artificial tree, was back in the dining room, and I decorated it with amaranth dreadlocks and other dried stuff from the garden like the alliums and the grasses. And the topper I actually made out of hydrangea branches. That little star, it literally took less than 10 minutes to make, and it was very, very effective. Outside, I made a garland, once again, pretty much the repeat of the garland from previous year, the greens with the bittersweet vine, and I flanked the door with 2 little Christmas trees, which I loved. They looked just so adorable. And I also made some more moss spheres that year and planted the Helleborus niger in the pots outside. And you could see what this looked like at night. Absolutely magical. You could see the garland, the little Christmas trees, the window box up top, and also the Christmas trees in the house. You could see it from the outside. That year, I also decided to decorate our kitchen pots. And I planted some green giants arborvitae, which I since then gifted to one of my friends. She planted it in their backyard. And I also planted a lot of eucharis and decorative cabbages and added this beautiful copper wire Christmas tree. And in the front, we added some stars that are hung on our dogwood tree, which looked just so magical. In 2023, or last year, I started decorating with the pots that flank our front door, and I added the willow supports that I had in the garden. And I also added some helichrysum, dusty miller, and Helleborus niger in those pots. You could see how beautiful those willow supports look at night with the fairy lights. The artificial tree was once again in the dining room, and it was pretty much a repeat of all of the previous years as for the decorating. But the new thing that I decided to try last year was this hanging garland, and it turned out so amazing. So I basically used a chicken wire, and I stuck some branches in there from the garden. It was actually not that hard to make, but you have to make sure that the ceiling can support the weight, and I just added some ornaments to this installation. It was definitely a hit with the guests. Another hanging installation were these alliums that I dried from the garden, and I just used a Scotch tape and I taped them to the ceiling. They were such an amazing display, and especially when the heat came on and the warm air started moving around the dried flowers, I wasn't expecting that beautiful effect. And the front door wreath I made out of the greens from the garden, and I also added some miscanthus grass, which has beautiful spirals once it dries, and I also added some hypericum. The garland looked beautiful last year. I pretty much repeated it from the years before, but I added some miscanthus grass, which added that interesting texture to the garland and had some curlicues. And at night it looked so magical with the garland and the window box, Christmas trees that you could see through the window. Our Christmas tree last year was pretty simple, but the one thing I loved were the icicles that I got off Amazon. Just added so much movement to the tree. And this is pretty much the overview of our Christmas decor from last year. Just beautiful. You guys, this is it for today. Let me know in the description down below which ones were your favorite displays throughout these years, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.